And this has to be just a huge blow to the abortion rights community. I mean, if these kids...
I don't see why. I mean, it has nothing to do with the legal or the moral rightness of abortion, because it has everything to do with the law. Would banning abortion have stopped Kermit Gosnell? Answer, no. Like, he was doing it before it was legal. He was doing illegal abortions. I don't really see how banning abortion, which is what is on the table here, would have done anything to him.
I'm just thinking more people thinking about abortion. I mean, politics is one thing, and then people's views on abortion, are sort of a related but separate thing.
Well, I agree that people should have their own opinions about abortion. I don't,
What I'm saying, the abortion rights community has really, strongly advocated for the legality of abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. These were kids
That's not true. That is false.
Well, am I wrong that the abortion rights community fights
support to viability? They support Roe, basically, to viability by choice. After that, only under medical and health necessity. Most pro-choicers I know believe that post 24 weeks restrictions are fine.
Right.
Somebody like Dr. Tiller went out of his way to make sure that anybody he was doing a post-viability abortion for needed it.
And need can include, like, the kid has Down syndrome or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the person. Like, I don't necessarily feel like somebody should be forced to mother a child that they don't feel capable of mothering.
Meaning,
I don't know if I could do it, but then again, I don't want to have babies at all, so.
Well, what I'm saying, though, is, like, there's an argument, and a lot of people would argue that it's perfectly fine to have a late-term abortion if you, fulfill whatever these criteria are. So the big problem with Gosnell was that sometimes these kids were, living, breathing for 20 minutes on their own before he snipped their spinal cords. But if he'd done that in utero, that would be fine.
No. I mean, he was doing post-24-week abortions. Like, it wouldn't have been fine. They were illegal. Like, regardless of his methods or him letting them breathe, it was illegal. Like,
but if you were in a different state where it was legal, then it would be fine. Like in Pennsylvania, you're not supposed to.
It depends. It depends on, like, what we're talking about here. Like, the providers of late-term abortions, like, it's incredibly complicated. Like, they, it goes on a case-by-case basis. Very few or any, like, providers that I know of would be like, yeah, you're 38 weeks and you've discovered your baby has Down syndrome. They're not going to do that. Like, a lot of, post, the later in the pregnancy, the, like, less likely an abortion is. And
significantly,
there's been a lot of emphasis on trying to do prenatal testing earlier and earlier so that if you do need an abortion because the baby's got some horrible fetal, abnormality, or you are going to die if you continue to be pregnant or have a horrible stroke or something, they can abort earlier. But, there are cases, and that's just what medicine's like. There are close call cases. There are things that, you discover at 30 weeks that the baby's got Tay-Sachs disease, and, like, what are you going to do? I suppose you could deliver it and let it breathe and then just watch it die. I don't know that would be necessarily something that's humane or kind to anybody involved in the situation. Down syndrome is obviously the thing that anti-choicers would prefer to, like, hang on to, because people with Downs often get along just fine. But, most Downs syndrome abortions are done way, way earlier in the pregnancy because they can do an amniocentesis now.
Well, and the New York Times reported a couple of years ago that 90% of all children with Downs are aborted. 90%, which is just amazing.
Children with Downs require a lot of work, and
I
don't feel like anybody should be forced to have a child with Downs. If they don't feel up to it. I don't know who that benefits.
We have good friends who have a child with Downs, and I think that they would argue that there's a lot of misinformation about how much work is involved. Not that there's not a lot of work involved, but of course the pro-life position is that abortion is the unjustified taking of a human life. So all these other issues, like it might be hard to have this child, or it might be hard to raise this child.
Exactly, and I think it's intellectually dishonest to hang on to Downs when you're just against abortion.
Yeah, but it is. It is kind of surprising, right? 90% of children with Downs are aborted. I mean, that's fascinating to me.
Most people do not set out when they try to get pregnant thinking they're going to have a child that's got mental health issues. And so, I can imagine that that's something that when it happens, you just don't want to do it. I don't really, I'm not surprised. It's not something, it's not like somebody wants a child that has Down syndrome. When they find out the child does, then they maybe make that decision, but I don't think anyone said so.
Right. I think we're talking about just completely different approaches to parenting and what it means to be a parent and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate when you're faced with a challenge. Probably a lot of parents don't want to have children that have any number of problems, and once they're born, we say, well, just because you don't want this child that has problems doesn't mean that you get to terminate his life.
Once they're born, but I feel like somebody's moral value once they're a conscious person is completely different than when they're not a person with a brain and feelings and relationships and can suffer or, I feel like there's a huge moral distinction between a child and a fetus. Especially, I feel like a fetus gains value as they become more baby-like, but I don't think that...
But in the case of Gosnell, these children were fetuses moments before, and they would have been able to...
Yeah, which is why it's illegal.
In many states.
Why it is illegal to deliver a baby and kill it, and why it is illegal to have a post-viability abortion.